My name is Marcia Robinson, and we are recording an oral history with Cynda Kash as part of the MUMories Oral History Project. This project marks the 50th anniversary of the Miami University Middletown, Ohio campus. This interview is taking place on March 17th, 2017 at the Gardner Harvey Library. Ms. Kash, do I have your consent to proceed with this interview?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. Would you please tell us about your connection to the Middletown campus?
I became a student here. My connection to Miami Middletown was becoming a non-traditional student at age 46 in January of 1993. I came here to finish a bachelor's degree.
What prompted you to come back to school?
Minimum wage jobs. What prompted me to come back to school were jobs that I was not suited for. I tried so many jobs and they just didn't fit me. And I knew I wanted a better pay. I was a single mom and we struggled financially because of the pay scale of someone out there who's not skilled. So that was my prompt.
How did you feel about walking onto a campus as a single mother and there are all these 18-year-olds in the class? How did that feel?
You know, when I came to school here as a non-traditional, I thought nothing of the differences. To me, the 18-year-olds right out of school and me as a 46-year-old single mom, we were all students. And we were all here to learn and had a goal of wanting to get somewhere with our degrees. So I never felt the difference. I think the professors always loved the non-traditionals because we weren't saying, how do you score, what kind of test do you give, and do you score on a curve? Because we really delved into each course that we took. So yeah, I just didn't see the difference, really. It didn't bother me.
Were there any professors or assignments that really stand out in your memory that you really enjoyed?
I don't really think, other than statistics, sorry, Dr. Amy Fisher, it was the only C I got. Otherwise, I got all A's and B's. I loved them all, Marcia. I loved all my classes. But being sociology always stood out because we had Michelle Charlton. She was, I think, an adjunct here. And her classes were impactful, really made you think about our world and our society. And when you've been cloistered in a fairly small Midwestern town as a single parent, you weren't that worldly, you know. And so she really opened my eyes to a lot of social issues.
What kinds of social issues really caught your attention?
I think for me, the social issues that caught my attention, I think I did not realize, and I'm not a feminist, but I think I didn't realize that women did appear to be a lesser part of our world, or viewed. We weren't, but I think we were viewed as less than. And so being in those classes really made me feel very equal to everyone.
Good. And so what career did you eventually pursue?
I went, the career that I chose, because I was fortunate enough to be able to do the entire career here at Miami Middletown, was social work. Now, Miami has never been an accredited program, but Glenn Abraham, who was one of the instructors here who taught the social work methods classes, knew enough, as he was on the board, a social work licensing board in Ohio, and still is. And so he knew what classes to tell us to take, so that when we graduated, we could go take the test and become the licensed social worker position if we so choose.
So what was your degree in then?
It was a Bachelor of Science, and actually it was social work major. It was a social work major, and sociology was my minor. But again, it wasn't viewed as an accredited program. So that's why Glenn Abraham helped us make sure we got all the right classes. So it would be the same as if we had graduated from an accredited social work program.
Did you benefit from any of the liberal arts courses?
Oh gosh, yes. I guess when you say, anthropology, just to open my eyes to, I heard the term, the first time I ever heard the term ethno-eccentric, how as Americans we're so ethno-eccentric. And it just so registered, it really opened my eyes. We had to read a book called The Forest People, and it was about the pygmies in Africa living in the forest, living sustainably on their surroundings and only coming out a few times of the year to earn some of the things they couldn't get in the forest. So, it just opens your eyes to what's out there in the world instead of what's in Middletown, Ohio. And my English class, I love Dr. John Hayda. He was brilliant. And I worked very hard for my A in there. And I still see him. He's retired. I think he teaches still some part-time. But I see him around town. And every time I see him, I said, you were my favorite. So I had 2 years at Ohio State back in the 60s. But of course, not everything transferred. So I really only had a year transfer. So I didn't have to take as many general classes. I don't know what they call it now, it wasn't the Miami Plan, something like that. But, yes, geography. I loved cultural geography, social geography. The physical geography was harder because it included a lot of math. But the is it Ron Garrett? Can't remember, he's retired from here. He made that class fascinating, different cultures of the world. So I started living outside of Middletown, Ohio, even though I was living here. The education, it's just, and the critical thinking skills, oh my gosh, I never worked so hard as I worked in his class. And he was tough, he demanded. When the quarter started, there were 40-some students, and by midterm, it was down to 20 because he was demanding, and he expected you to memorize. Don't ask me what the meaning of geography is to be. We had to do that on every test. And I'll never forget on my second midterm, he came in and wrote on the board, well, the highest you could get was an 82. He was writing the scores. And there was one person that got a 75. And I said to my seatmate, well, I sure don't like them. And he turned and grinned at me. It was me who got the 75. So I can remember spending 11 hours one Saturday studying, making a map of the world and putting all the countries in. He gave us a copy. And so I learned good study skills here. I learned how to, even though I wasn't going to be a geography professor, I put my whole heart into it because that's what he expected. And I think that's why they always like non-traditional students here.
Did those study skills help you after graduation?
Oh, the study skills that I developed here, I think helped me know how to apply what were my strengths in any job that I did. And like I said, math was never my strong suit, but research. Now, I didn't have research. I took a research methods class. That was required for social work. But I learned how to dig. And when you're a social worker, you need to know how to dig and find those resources. Well, you sure had to find them in your classes here to write those papers or be part of a panel discussion or a group project.
When students came back to college, did they have any kind of placement test that they needed to take?
Before I came back, now this would have been the fall of, because I started back in January of 93, so this would have been the fall of 92. Mary Lou Flynn was here, and I knew her from being active in the community. And there was something called the IRMA, the English Reading Math Assessment. And that helped with where they knew to place you. I scored I scored pretty far out of college on the English, but I scored remedial on the math, which didn't surprise me. When you don't use it, you lose it. So I think I have pretty good practical math application skills, but I didn't in the student sense. So yes, and that helped me know what I needed to take. And I can't remember which remedial math I took, but so of course statistics was not my favorite. I struggled.
Speaking of the word struggle, some students who are coming back to college find it a struggle to put together the finances to be here. Do you have any recollections of how you put your package together to get here?
I had no idea when I came back to college how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know what college cost. I mean, was it $500? You know, was it $1,000? Was it $10,000? I mean, it was just a complete blank. So I started calling around, having worked in the community for 9 years, and I started calling different people saying, what organizations give scholarships? Because that's that researcher part of me. And I dig, and again, good social work skills when you're finding resources for clients. So through the Chamber of Commerce, she told me of the American Business Women's Association that gave scholarships. So I called, and they were kind of shocked. They had never had a non-traditional student apply, but I filled out the paperwork. My father had been a much beloved teacher and coach here in Middletown, Harold Mason. And so a lot of those people on the board, a lot of those ladies had my dad as a teacher. So they got all imbued with the idea first of, ooh, a non-traditional student, we've never done that. And Harold Mason's daughter. So one of the students who had been awarded a scholarship in the spring didn't go to school, so they had $1,500 in their pot, and that's what they gave me. Well, they gave to the university. And then you start learning how to work the financial aid, you know, and I just lived at that financial aid window, not just because it wouldn't have been online at that time. It was all paperwork, you know, application. But I was always at that financial aid window asking, any scholarship applications? And in my 3 years of attending here, year-round, I had over $8,000 of scholarships. For the American Business Women's Association, they supported my scholarship 3 years in a row. So it was $1,500 for 3 years, each year. But I got a Casper, like a lot of Miami scholarships. There was a Casper one, and they were usually around $900. And then I learned about the loan process. Because my senior year here, I had to borrow a little bit more. I worked up to 4 part-time jobs being a full-time student and a mother of single mother of 2 teenagers going through those teenage angst and woes and challenges. But I worked, of which one was a work study. I did some work study here for Dr. Robert Seufert. He has the applied research here at Miami, still does. At 80, he's still doing it. Saw him the other day, and so that was one of my jobs. I was a nanny. I did interior house painting for people that knew me. And then I had an old beater car, and my mechanic was keeping it together for me, and I would do some of his computer work in exchange. So that's why I said I had 4 part-time jobs. So I just am not a quitter. I'm a fighter. And so the financial end didn't intimidate me. I just knew I had to figure it out.
Some of our students who have children try to figure out how to manage the hours in a day.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the system that you came up with for yourself? How did you manage student life and parent time?
So to come back to school and be a single parent of two teenagers had its challenges. They pretty much could take care of themselves. If I had an evening class, I'd fix the meal before I came. But they had learned to cook on their own. And, they're going through their teenage angst years. And so I wasn't involved in activities here because between 4 part-time jobs and being a single mom, but the best part of this journey was I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and a divorce when they were 4 and 6 didn't allow for that. But when you're a student here and you have 2 kids that were latchkey for a long time, most of my classes were in the morning, so I might be home by noon or 1 o'clock. I would be there when they got home from school. So it was kind of like being a stay-at-home mom. And then if I had an evening class, like I said, I would fix the meal or have time with them. I did not study a lot in the evening. I got up 5 in the morning before classes. And my son would tell his friends, as he was 13, he was kind of young for his age, but still, he would say, my mom gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and studies. Well, I'm a morning person, and that way I was more available for them when they came home in the afternoon. And, just them being around is a disruption in a schedule. They're in and out, or they want to ask you a question, so it's kind of hard to have continuity of time to study. I'm not saying I didn't study, depending on what I was doing. I might be able to write a paper or type it up. I didn't have a computer. I had a word processor. So, yeah. So I wasn't really involved in activities here. I made a lot of friends. We would get together in, I guess you call it the commons. I don't know what they call with where you eat. And we would commiserate or celebrate, depending on what subject we were taking or, how we were doing. And I had one fellow student that we were both non-traditional and single moms. And I know she graduated with a 4 So she was a good study partner. We studied well together, and we did do that. She reminded me when I saw her last couple weeks ago that her mom had been in a very bad car accident, and how I came to the hospital and we studied mythology there together in her mom's room while she was with her mom. So, gosh, that almost makes me want to tear up. Yeah, that was she reminded me of that. I had forgotten that.
Thank you for sharing that. Many of our students have similar stories.
Life doesn't stop when you become a student. You have this wonderful camaraderie of being with the other students, and the non-traditionals found each other rather quickly, and it's obvious. And then once you get into your major classes, you're with a lot of the same students. And and especially in the social work and sociology arena, you had a lot of, because the friend I was just mentioning, she was sociology and what would be criminology, I think, was her field. So we always had a lot of the same classes. But yeah, you really support each other. And that's what I loved about this campus. Well, it wasn't very big. I think at the time I was attending, there were about 2,400 students. And I think 25% were non-traditional, so there were plenty of us. And I can remember being in classes that there'd only be 15 students. That was perfect. Now, your intro classes to psychology and anthropology were the big 100-student. But, when you had Adolf Greenberg, who taught anthropology, you didn't feel like you were in a class of 100. He made it alive and real and interesting. Now, it might be because I love studying people and cultures, so maybe others wouldn't have felt that way if they were some kind of math major, but he was superb. He was a good professor.
This may seem like a major leap, but I'd like to talk about a couple things that you've mentioned. One of those is a word processor. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about the evolution of technology.
Yes.
And some may not know that you're not talking about an application or an app.
Oh, good point.
So could you talk to us about computer technology that you had available?
Okay. When I became a student here in January of '93, I don't even remember. I might have had a typewriter that I could have typed papers on, but somewhere along the way, I bought an actual machine, and it was big and clunky. It was this size, it was this tall, and it was a word processor. That was the extent of what I used my 3 years here at Miami Middletown. And I did, you would get those discs to save things on. I didn't know how to even go turn on a computer. Now, one of my classmates was more savvy, and I think she would come here to the library, because I can assure you, as a single mom, you didn't have money to go out and buy some of this technology, so you really used what was here at the library. Well, I liked being at home more as I stayed with 2 kids. She had more family in town, I didn't. And so she had family that could come help with their kids. And so I bought the word processor, and it was $200 and some. And for a single mom who, was putting herself back through college, that was a lot. But I wanted to be able to do the work, because if I got inspired, I didn't want to have to hurry and get in the car and come here to campus and work at the library. I think there was a computer room downstairs with a lot of computers, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned family.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us about your family story and moving into Middletown?
Okay. I was born in Middletown, 1946 at the old Middletown Hospital. Mabel Gardner was a lifelong physician that delivered my brother, who was born in '34. My father and mother came here in 1931. He had just graduated from Ohio University, and he was a history, social studies teacher, health teacher. So he started, he was on the first staff at Roosevelt Junior High School. He was their gym teacher, he was their football coach, their basketball coach, their track coach, their baseball coach. He loved sports, so he did it all. So yes, my family goes back to that time. They were both from Columbus, Ohio, but this was his first assignment where he got the job, and it was a new school, and he loved it. He loved being a teacher. So many coaches, they love their coaching first and then the classroom second. No, he loved his classrooms. And when my father died, I was only 12. It was 1959. And for 2 days, because they used to have longer funeral times, people came through the receiving line from my mother and myself and said, "Mrs. Mason, I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for Coach," or "I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for Mr. Mason." And then when I moved, I grew up in this town. I graduated in 1964, and I went to Ohio State for 2 years. And I didn't know financial aid or loans or so forth. So we didn't have any, my mother's a widow, we only had enough money for 2 years. So then I got married. I got my MRS degree and supported us while he finished. So we stayed in Columbus, but I was always back and forth between Middletown and Columbus. But Middletown was always home to me. And, I wasn't here when they were doing the groundbreaking for Miami Middletown. But I gather that Barry Levy, who of course was a driving force in Miami Middletown, his widow told me several years ago that when they were doing the groundbreaking, or maybe the dedication when it was built, that he mentioned my dad's name at that time, Harold Mason. So maybe you can help, maybe I can research and find out what some of those ceremonies were about to see. So, and you know, I always knew when I lived in Columbus and then lived in Florida, but after my divorce, I wanted my children to have family. My ex-in-laws and all of them were here because my mother and father were both deceased, and a brother in Seattle, Washington. And so I came back to town, and I had those jobs that I always felt I had some incredible talents. But let's go back to Middletown, Ohio in the 1950s. Let's go anywhere in this country in the 1950s. You, as a female, were taught or thought it was just part of the culture. You would either be a teacher, a nurse, a bookkeeper, a secretary, or a teller. Well, I didn't have skill set for any of those. So I was really kind of a lost soul, not knowing. My first round at Ohio State, I thought I'd go into teaching because I always loved children. But I did not, to me, I didn't fit anywhere. So I had jobs that parts were good for me, but I felt I wasn't using all my talents, but I didn't know what those talents were because I wasn't a teacher, a nurse, a bookkeeper, a teller, or a secretary. Those didn't suit me. What I didn't know until I came back to school is that communication and problem solving are my strong suits. And those are absolute skills you need to have as a social worker. You can't be a social worker without being able to express what you're seeing to help someone, or be able to communicate within the community to get services. So, you know, so 1950s, so when I came back here, the only thing I thought, well, I'll do social work. I really wasn't that savvy of what was available. I knew sociology, because I always had interest in human stories, our fellow mankind. I always was interested in their stories. But I didn't know where that went. So I came back kind of blindly. But it didn't take me long to put two and two together. I mean, I was 46, so I had some life skills behind me. And it became apparent that I could do my social work degree, get the classes that would lead to a social work license, all here at Miami Middletown. And it just, I never thought I was that smart because I had all these brilliant friends. Well, I struggled with certain elements. There's something called multiple intelligences, and you as a professor would know that. But learning styles. And I think I learned later in life that a lot of the way in the 50s into the 60s classes were taught did not suit my learning style. So I struggled on some levels. And so I never thought of myself as that good of a student, even though I got good grades. But I really struggled. So, but coming back here, my goal was to graduate cum laude, and I did. And so I learned that I was smarter than the average bear. But my smarts, I think, and I would say this to anyone that wanted to come back to school, I don't think I was necessarily book smart, but I was smart enough to figure out what needed to be done to get the job done. Well, you can't have a much better life skill than that. But I had 3 years here that I got to practice that and gain confidence. Oh, now see, I'm going to get choked up again. Because your instructors, your professors, your adjuncts, whoever was leading the class, they weren't the enemy. They were here to support you in whatever way they could. and encourage you and hopefully do your best. And you knew that, you knew that about them. Again, at 46, I think I might have had a little more astute just with life skills. But so, that I think I'm not being born in 1946, I'm the first of the baby boomers. And so we had a lot to overcome in the mores and those being products of the 50s. So to come back to school, but as a single parent, I had to make an awful lot of decisions for my children, but it was never too late to make decisions about my life too. Because I was always a person of tremendous hope. And so coming here and getting my bachelor's degree changed my life. Changed it tremendously.
I'd like to talk more about community.
Okay.
Because the whole vision for this campus was a community vision. Mm-hmm. It was not just Armco Park or
right.
Armco. If there were other companies, but there were individuals who participated in this. One of the community groups you mentioned is the American Business Women. Mm-hmm. Do you know any of those women by name that you would like to mention?
All the people that were involved, Marcia, they were much older when this was going on, so they've either passed on or aren't involved. I think the chapter is kind of diminished.
Okay.
So,
did you recall Evelyn Day by any chance? Have you met her? Okay.
No, Mary Eileen Cordray was who was my go-to person with the American Business Women's Association.
We like to get women's names into the story, so thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Now, also you mentioned community. Another vision of the planning community or planning committees was that this campus would provide opportunities for culture to the city at large. Did you participate in any of the public events, say the Artist and Lecture Series, or attend any of the events at Winkelman Auditorium?
I don't remember doing that much, Marcia.
That makes sense for someone who's working four
four
part-time
jobs
jobs.
and had 2 teenagers.
Yes.
And wanted to graduate cum laude.
I'd say that's okay. Don't feel badly about that.
Yeah.
After you graduated, how
Now,
did
wait a
you
minute.
see...
One thing I do want to say, as approaching a social work major, or in the way we worked it out here at Miami Middletown, I did have to go out in the community and do some internships. And so I did a couple at United Way. Excuse me. And that really opened my eyes to services in the community that I didn't know. And as a single mom, it helped me. Now, I need to go back to, we have a homeless shelter here in Middletown called the Hope House. And I was very active when that building was given rent-free to Nancy Caldwell to turn into a homeless shelter. My 10 and 12-year-old and I were down there 3 or 4 nights a week, painting, scraping. The tile floor that's in that Hope House now is tile that I laid most of. And but I started learning. There was a wonderful Cecilia Brandenburg. She was a social worker that worked for Family Services. She eventually worked at the Hope House. But she is the one, I can tell you as a single mother, there were times I was getting shut-off notices for my electric. And I would call Cecilia, Seal, as we called her. And I would go to her, and she would write a voucher, and I took it to Salvation Army, and they paid the shut-off notice of $252. The apartment I was renting was a duplex, and it was leaky windows and not good insulation. So I don't care how cool you kept it, the bills got up there. So the community here helped me survive in ways. And there was a Christmas, she called me and said, "Hey, Seal Brandenburg, I've got something. Can you come into the office?" She had a check for me for $500. And someone had called her and said, "Is there anyone in the community that you think could use that lift up, you know, that's really doing something that they're trying to help themselves?" And so she channeled it in my direction, and she did that 2 years in a row. And the second year, I was able to buy tires that were my bald tires for my old car. So the community, I had forgotten about that, how the community in its own way supported me being here at Miami. Everyone in this town, because I had worked in an industry that I attended a lot of events and so forth, so everyone knew about my journey. So they were cheerleaders for me. So this was a wonderful community to put Miami Middletown in, to have the regional campus. We were fortunate.
In the short time that I've known you, I think you've started paying that forward. Are there other instances where you can say that Miami graduates are also paying things forward to the community? Do you see our footprint anywhere in Middletown?
On the periphery, because the field I just retired from was in another town working for a retirement community. So I wasn't, for 13 years, I was not really involved in Middletown. Well, I was involved in starting a community garden, the Reynolds Street Community Gardens, and I've been involved in preservation work and helped. I spearheaded an event that we unearthed the 100-year time capsule from the Carnegie Library. So I've been involved on those levels. But that was me, so I wasn't as aware. But as I've gotten more involved in the revitalization of downtown Middletown, I've met different people who are from Miami that are quite involved in the town. And is CBI's a community-based institute? Is that in Miami?
It's not
based?
I know we have Miami people involved in it, but I don't know if it's an official arm of the college.
I certainly know of a lot of Miami people that are involved in it. I mean, I'm meeting people, so I think maybe that's why I thought it was a Miami-based
we have
activity.
Interviewed the person who helped to start that.
Okay. Okay, so see? Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to add to the story about the importance of MUM to you or to the community?
Okay, let me regain my composure. Well, the opportunity that I had to come to Miami Middletown, green. I had no idea what I was going to be doing or where this was going to lead to. It built confidence in me like I had never had. I learned that I was smart, you know. I learned that my professors would say, "That is such an excellent question, Cynda." And I had one professor tell me, "I was so grateful you were in my class because you would keep it going a lot of times," because I'm very inquisitive and I want to know. I may not have been a botany major, but when I was in that class, I was 100% engaged and involved. So this opportunity, I can't say enough. I really wish a lot of students, my own daughter went away to college, and I think if more students coming out of the schools around here could come for a year here, have the comfort of still being at home, having a familiar environment, and adjusting to what college is all about. I just think regional campuses. My own daughter out in Seattle is going that route and just is getting her associate's degree this month. So there aren't enough words to say what this 3 years did for me. There aren't enough words. And I'm a wordsmith, and I've never been at a loss for words, but I think this is a first for me because it was mammoth in my life to be able to come here. I was 46 years old, you know, and I'd had a lot of crappy jobs that didn't pay well. You know, if you're on the lower echelon of a place, you're not always highly thought of or well treated. And this gave me dignity. Getting my degree gave me dignity, gave me a purpose. It gave me a skill set. And it gave me pride in myself of the things that I didn't know I could do. And I learned. I mean, I had the life skills of being a surviving parent of a divorce and raising 2 small children on my own, but that's survival. So you're digging down in and just trying to survive. This was about building me. And with my children being 13 and 15, I could focus more on me. And they were real proud of me. My first semester here, I got a 4-point. And my daughter, who was top of her class at Middletown, went all over that school telling everyone that her mother got a 4-point. Yeah, she was real proud of Mommy.
Is there a piece of advice you'd like to give to future students looking at this video?
Oh, what words of wisdom. Just give it a try. And search out those that can help you, whether it's your fellow students, your faculty. You know, one thing I found being in college, it's an incredibly nurturing environment. Incredibly nurturing. So if you feel the world hasn't treated you very well, or that it's kind of a bad place to be in, go to college. Because you'll see a whole different side. You know, you'll see a whole different side. You'll see people that are your cheerleaders. You know, when you're out in the workforce, you don't always have the best bosses or coworkers. But when you're in a college environment, you have cheerleaders. They want to see you succeed. And it's infectious. It's infectious. So give it a try. Look in every window of opportunity on this campus. When I was here, I never met other than someone behind, whether it was the financial aid window or student government window, activities window, that didn't want to help you and went the extra mile to help you. And I can't believe that it's really any different, you know, 20-some years later.
Do I have your permission to discontinue the interview?
Yes.
Thank you.